This is Equip and Engage, a podcast by Subsplash, exploring how ministry, technology, and innovation come together to equip churches around the world to engage their communities.
Hey, welcome to Equip and Engage from Podcast. Really excited to be back with you for another conversation just about the intersection of ministry and technology. We're doing this just to serve as many churches around the world as possible, and I'm really excited for today's episode. My name's Chris, part of the team here at Subsplash, and today I'm joined by Jason Houtsma. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be super fun. Jason, you are the founder of Worship Artistry, which is a really cool platform with interactive song lessons for learning and practicing worship music. But before we get into your work and how you're equipping churches, our connection, yours and mine, goes back just a little bit further than Subsplash or Worship Artistry, right?
Yes. I think maybe you were in 7th grade, I want to say.
I think that sounds about right. I was just 13 years old, maybe.
13
yeah,
years
where did
old.
we meet?
So Chris actually took guitar lessons from me for many, many years. He's actually somebody I always use as an example, because his first lesson, I asked him what kind of music he listened to, and he was like, I don't really listen to music. And I was like, why are we here?
What are we doing here?
Yes,
why are you paying me?
And he was super quiet, but then he ended up becoming like one of my favorite students of all time, and probably one of the most gifted, and has done the most with music out of hundreds of people I've taught. So he's made the impression. So anyway, it's made it so that I don't give up on anybody right in the beginning. I give him a chance.
Good. That's what I'm here to do for you, man. That's great.
And now I'm on this podcast.
Now you're here. I love it. I love how we've just come full circle in a way and like found a new reason to connect here, which is a passion that we both share for equipping teams to excel in ministry. So let's just hear about like what you're doing in your work. Bring us into the story. How did Worship Artistry even come to be?
So it's kind of funny. The timing is really interesting. It was right at the point where I told God I was done with music.
Yeah.
I was literally in this space where I had done a lot. I had taught guitar lessons for a long time. I'd been in a worship band. I had worship pastored in some places, but was really just kind of burnt out on all of it. And not even so much like I was burnt out on it, and then and kind of very critical of the worship world in general, because I just kind of had a really good glimpse of the industry and the way it all really works. And which is not necessarily bad, but it's just kind of it's disillusioning in some ways. And
I remember you were like moving toward being signed with your band and that sort of stuff, and deep in the church world. So there was a lot just to your processing, I'm sure, right? Right.
Yeah, there was a whole lot happening, and then we had our first kid, and my wife, it was looking at the place like, am I going to be traveling a lot? Like, what's the story? And I kind of came to the realization that she had to travel for her work, and it was like 2 weeks back to back. She was home for a couple of days, and I was trying to balance everything. And I was like, I'm not going to ask this of her. Like she's already supported me so much. We need to find a way to do this. And it broke her heart, because music was all I'd ever done. And so I was really at the place where I was like, all right, God, I'm done. I started helping my dad with like a concrete company for a short period of time. And right around that time, one of my, I guess you could say like one of my role models when I was a kid growing up, he was the guitar player in my church, and I was always the kid walking up to the stage after, like, "Hey, what kind of guitar is that? What's your amp?"
100%.
Right. Was traveling through, and I was like, "Oh, you should come over for dinner." And we just were talking and just about life. I hadn't seen him in years. Like, I mean, it'd probably been since my wedding since I had last seen him, kind of a deal. And he said he kept bringing up. He said, I get frustrated when I'm supposed to sit there and have a song ready. They don't just want me to play guitar anymore. He was a big Allman Brothers fan, big lead player.
Oh, right on.
Like, I mean, he and I used to jam on Whipping Post, which is like, if you've ever heard that song, it's a 22-minute live version of this song that's like in weird time. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. Like it's like 5 and then 4. It bounces back and forth. I'm like, why were you torturing me? I was just a high school kid. I didn't understand what was going on. But anyway, he was traveling through, and he was just like, they really want me to learn all these songs, not just play on them. And I just wish there was a place that I could just learn everything. Like there's YouTube, but YouTube is it's very inaccurate. I spend half my time trying to find something that's usable. And then I show up and it's like, oh, I've been playing it wrong the whole time anyway.
Yep.
And I was like, yeah, that'd be neat. And then we just kept talking about other stuff. And then he kind of, I always thought it'd be great though, if there's a website.
He just brings it back.
He just kept
again.
circling around. And it was probably like 4 or 5 times actually that he brought it around. And on the 5th time, it was like Inception. It's like he had planted this idea in my brain. And it really was, it was everything that I'd ever done. It's like I'd been teaching guitar for a very long time.
For years, yeah.
I'd been leading worship for a long time and writing worship music. Just everything just came together. So it just was such a natural, like, oh, well, if you did want to do this, this is what you could do. And and as he was leaving, he said, hey, well, if you'd be interested in doing this, I'd be interested in financing it. And so I just started. Yeah. So that I didn't even know was a thing. This is before Shark Tank, man. I didn't know you could go ask people for money. I was a musician. I was like, what?
Yep, that doesn't happen, right?
As a musician, you're just struggling to figure out that you actually get paid. You're like, this is amazing. $20 and dinner? Like, okay. So anyway, so that was kind of the start of it. And, there was a lot to dig through. I mean, at the time there was no service like this. And so everything that we developed was from the ground up. There was nothing we could grab. I mean, we created a lesson environment that did not exist, that felt very real, because you'd have your sheet music or your chord charts, and you could also have video and practice loops. And it was so far beyond anything that was out there at the time. And really we're staying in front of that with some stuff I can't talk about, but just saying.
Don't tell us. We'll watch closely.
But, so we had to build it from the ground up. There was no such thing as as licensing for the kind of thing we wanted to do. We had to go to the record labels, and they were still reeling from Kazaa and Napster, and we're like, you're just going to steal videos, exactly. Like, no, we want to pay you. And it took years to get things like that in place, to make sure that what we were doing was legal, making sure all the artists are getting paid. It was amazing how hard it was to pay them. It's like, we just want to send you a bunch of money. And there's just
please let us send you money.
Yeah. I've never had somebody resist money so hard, except for like when I go to pay the check and my dad's at the table. Like, besides that,
hand down right away.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think so. So that's how we started. We started just as just guitar, and then eventually developed into a full band solution with keyboard, bass, drums. We're adding vocals, and we just really wanted to be something right off the bat that just was built for people of whatever level that they played at, that it could A, help them prepare, and B, help them get better. And so it's built for like the most basic, like, I don't know how to hold a guitar, all the way through to experts who can very easily skip all that, quickly look at a piece of sheet music, watch a music video of what they're supposed to play, and be able to show up prepared and confident, and actually enjoy playing worship rather than struggling with what happens next,
Totally. Yeah, man, I love that. And like you said, it's such an immersive, interesting, unique experience, and totally ahead of its time. I think it was, and still is, and really serving like the full breadth of who's playing music at churches, like who's coming to bring their gifts to the body. I mean, it's everybody who can barely hold a guitar, like you said, and literally professionals too are serving their churches. So it's awesome to meet that full need there. Super cool. You've alluded to this a bit already as well, but I'm just curious to hear even more. What did it look like back in 2010 or so, right? This is about when you're getting
somewhere
started.
in there.
Yeah, what did it look like at that time as a church musician or a worship leader to prepare for Sunday? Like, what were the tools you had available before things like Worship Artistry?
What tools?
Exactly. Nothing.
I mean, yeah, it's true. Like, there's, you might get chord charts, or you might get a recording of the song, and then you're trying to arrange it. And that's where I spend all my time. Like, once I know the song, going down and recording the video and teaching it, that's second nature. That's done in an hour, editing it, piece of cake. It's really about the arrangement. And sometimes it can be so overwhelming for players, even now, even with our tools, where they get like, well, here's 5 songs, and now I've got to learn all 5 of these songs. And also I got to make sure my kid gets to soccer practice. I got to finish this work project that I'm working on. Oh, we got to get dinner on the table. And then all of a sudden it's 9 o'clock on Saturday night. And then they show up to church totally stressed out because and that's no fun. Nobody wants to do that. And so for me, worship kind of prepping for church really was always about just like rehearsal and having fun there. And I church playing should be really life-giving and enjoyable to worship musicians.
Yeah.
And way too often it just turns into a job immediately. And it turns into oh crap, I'm on for this week, rather than like, oh yeah, I'm on for this week.
Yeah, I think totally what you're describing is just so painfully common. I mean, you're talking about people who are part of a church. They belong to this community. They have a gift they want to bring to the community, but it is so just can be laborious and tedious and exhausting just to bring that. And so what you're trying to build is something that simplifies that. Technology simplifies the way that you can bring a gift and serve your church and build up the body, which is super cool. I'd love to talk about burnout for a minute. You mentioned this already. I know it's part of your story. And I think with church and work and everything looking so different this year in particular, it's kind of looming over all of us. I mean, I've even heard it called like $100 billion problem facing our economy. But to focus on the church specifically, how have you seen burnout in play? And to expand on that, how does a technology platform like Worship Artistry start to address that issue?
Sure, man. I lived my entire worship musician life in a cycle of like excitement, overuse, burnout, rest, excitement, and then we'll just start going through that loop, right? And I have not been burnt out in years now. It's been, and I'm like a worship pastor at a church, and I've loved it the whole time. I'm not saying I haven't had an off Sunday here and there, but for the most part, I've loved it. And there's a couple pieces to that. One is, a lot of times for a church of any size, it's hard to find people that are decent at playing. And so what ends up happening is, oh my gosh, you play guitar, or you're a good drummer is worth $1 million. Like, I keep telling my kids, just learn drums. If you could just get to the drums, you'll always have a job. My wife's like, stop convincing them to be musicians. But we end up, and then what happens is it's like, oh, you play drums. Great. I really like playing with you. So I'm going to schedule you on all these different things because you're the best at it. And we don't have anybody up and coming, and we don't, there might be that one other guy, but let's be honest, he's not very good. And so it makes everything so much harder. And so what ends up happening is that particular musician at first feels amazing because it's like, dude, I'm the guy, or I'm the girl, everyone loves me. Like,
they need
dude,
me.
Schedule me. And a lot of times people aren't very good at even just pacing themselves. And I think musicians, especially because we're conditioned to take every opportunity because you don't know when the next opportunity is going to come.
Yeah, sure.
And so in the sense, there's this like pastoral piece that needs to be there as the worship pastor and recognize where their people are at and be paying attention to that and saying, hey, you know what? I'm not going to schedule for this. Oh, but I can play. Like, no, I want you to rest. I want you to just get to sit and enjoy and be there. So there's that piece of just overuse. And what ends up happening is you do get burned out because the amount of rehearsals you have to be at, the amount of preparation that you need to do, and anything that you do all the time will just wear on you. Like it just will. And so I think that's a big piece of burnout. I think there's also just to answer your question. So going back, so what Worship Artistry does in that space is actually help people build their teams and equip them. I as a worship pastor, when I was at Hillcrest, I had some really sweet people come and audition and be like, hey, I want to be on the worship team. And you listen to them and you're like, man, you have the greatest heart. You're so nice. You want to do this so bad. You are not very good at the drums, but
just brutal honesty. Yeah.
Right.
Of course.
But there was no way to equip them outside of that. It was just kind of like the answer is no. And I don't know, practice more.
Yeah. Come back in a year.
Right. Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah.
And you know what? They almost never did because they're usually too hurt. And it's not like, and I'm not against people like holding a high standard, but there was like, it's a very different thing to say to somebody, hey, you know what? Sorry, you didn't make the team. Better luck next time. And hey, sorry you didn't make the team, but here's how you can build your skills. Listen, our church subscribes to this thing. I'll tell you what, I want you to go home and I want you to master these 5 songs. Here's your list of songs. When you feel like you've got those, I want you to come back to me. Let's look at it again.
Yeah.
That is a dramatically different way of handling things. And so, so there's that piece, right? There's all that, like, that's having more people means that I don't end up getting overused as a musician and getting totally burnt out.
That's huge.
The other piece of burnout, sorry, I'm giving you like a really long answer here.
I'm learning loads. I'm here for it.
But the other thing about burnout is the pressure that we put on our worship musicians sucks a lot of the joy out of it. There tends to be a pretty high standard. You know, I've been in so many different church environments. I've been in traditional ones. I've been in very charismatic ones. I've been through the whole thing. And what actually a lot of times gets played, like what happens with worship pastors and worship musicians, is our identity becomes tied to this music. And the responsibility of God's presence is resting on our shoulders. And we have this idea like, it's on me. And if I mess up, you know, and I know, and here's the thing, I'm going to say this, and there's going to be people that are listening and they're going to go, no, that's just totally the wrong way to think. And it's like, yes, you're right. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It is the wrong way to think. And I think in some ways, one of the biggest things that helps people from burning out is actually having a true understanding of what worship is, what our role as worshipers are. And that if you can worship and lead worship from your identity in Christ rather than for your identity in Christ, that's a very different thing. And so I think a big part of burnout is just a poor theology and belief in understanding our role as worship leaders. You know, it's weird because a lot of times we get put on stage and it's this weird environment that we're like, you know, we're playing electric guitars and it feels like rock and roll and, you know, whatever. But like, I always tell our team, like, we're waiters. We're just waiters. Like we bring the food, you know, like other people are doing the cooking. We're just showing up going like, hey, I just hope you have a good time. Nobody's like, man, that waiter, dude, let me get that waiter's autograph. You know, nobody cares about that. And I think in church, when a lot of pressure is put on perfection and the presence of God is put in your hands, I just don't think that's true. I don't think that's real. I think God works very clearly beyond what we do. Like, it's just, I get to do this, and me thinking that that like God needs me to move in my congregation is utterly wrong thinking. But it's thinking that will burn you out because it's a responsibility that you were never meant to carry. And so that's kind of the other piece I think about. And I don't know how Worship Artistry speaks into that, except that we are constantly giving that message of like, hey, it's okay. Oh, you messed up? Like, did you do your best? Then I think God thinks that's cool. You know, like it's okay if you just brought like the 1 penny. It's fine. That's what you have. Sure. You know? So anyway, I think those are 2 really big pieces of burnout, just overuse and then also really poor theology.
Yeah, man, those are really good. I also just love how you've sort of positioned worship artistry as technology to be something that a leader can offer as a pathway or an on-ramp of some kind. I just think that's huge. It's the difference between just screening somebody and just evaluating like what can they really bring and discipling them in that and investing in them so that they can better serve the church that you're both a part of. And I just think that is so huge. I think you've also started to hit on just the real ministry of a worship leader, or maybe even anyone whose role involves overseeing a team, right? It's not just executing the thing or pulling off the production or whatever. It's a little bit more than that. Do you want to speak just about how you see like the ministry of a worship leader or anyone leading a team?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the term worship pastor. I think that a pastoral heart is very necessary. Because you will just think about things really differently than if you're putting a product on a stage or you're pastoring everyone around you. And a pastoral heart isn't just for your congregation, it's for your team, which you have the most influence over, right? Like if I can encourage my team of people, and dude, you're probably sitting here going, yeah, and let me tell you about all the times you totally sucked at that, Jason. Like totally fine.
Not even close.
I'm learning. I've been learning, but there is that. I think if we as worship leaders don't think of ourselves as like, I'm a leader, which has kind of like a business term to it almost.
Yep.
And
True,
we're creating a product for the congregation who are consumers. That is completely missing the whole point of what we do. Once again, we're waiters and we're pastors. Pastors are meant to be servants who serve their people, not celebrities that everyone's like, you are perfect. And so I think that if we, if we just pastor our team, which means building a relationship with them, which means not overusing them, which means caring about them as a person. And if I look at leading worship as pastoring my congregation, that I'm in partnership with my senior pastor, like we do this together. Yep. He pastors using words and with relationships, and I pastor with the music that we play. And that means the song choice. And that means that I'm praying for my church, and I am in relationship with the people in my church, so that when I'm sitting there putting together my worship set, I'm actually thinking, I wonder what Claire can sing right now because she's going through this. I wonder what, so-and-so, like, I know this is going, man, someone so is celebrate. We need to celebrate with them. And just kind of engaging with the congregation and pastoring them. I think those things are hugely important, and a lot of time get passed over because we're so concerned about competence and, like, wow, you're a really talented musician. That has nothing to do with my ability to pastor.
True.
So,
yeah, man, that's good. That's a really just rich way to approach this role. Thinking back just to the platform as a whole, Worship Artistry, what you guys have built. When we've spoken in the past, I've been really fascinated by how you've talked about your competitors, quote unquote. You run a business, of course, so you're thinking about things like market share and competition. But if there's anything Worship Artistry is really competing against, I think it's more fundamental than just a different business, isn't it? I've heard you talk about that before. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that we really are competing against is lack of awareness about people willing to invest in people.
Wow.
Churches, in my experience, churches will often think nothing of buying a $50,000 soundboard and this array of speakers and making sure that all the cables don't have any interference and like this amazing sound system. And sometimes they'll buy the instruments so that the instruments are all great. But very rarely do those same churches think about the people that are going to be playing music through all that equipment.
Yep.
And it's like, and if you want to think about return on investment, like here's the thing, man, you could give me a Squier Strat and a little practice amp, and I will make that thing sound better than a lot of people will make, their Vox AC30 with their Gretsch, whatever,
Exactly.
I don't know. I'm not a huge gear guy, but I'm just saying, like, skill and ability is so much more valuable than gear. And I think a lot of times we as worship like, it's interesting looking at our subscribership. We have team accounts and we also have individual accounts. And it's amazing how many individuals are willing to spend, and granted, it's not that much money, but even so, like, are willing to spend money to get better so that they can provide for their church. I think that is awesome. I'm really surprised at how few churches go, hey, you know what? We should invest in our team. Because what will usually happen is a worship pastor will think about themselves. The question is like, well, do I need this? And it's like, I don't know, maybe. I don't know what your skill level is. But a lot of times it's not really you. Like, it's your keyboard player that's only knows how to read music and like has been playing classical piano her whole life. She needs this. And you know what? It's going to make your band sound better. It's going to make her happier. And you're going to have something to work with. Do you need this? It's like, no, but your drummer might need to practice these beats at half speed with these drum loops so that when it speeds up, he actually plays it in time, And in turn, for the worship pastor, it is, man, it is so much more fulfilling to play good music than bad music. Like,
yep,
God loves our heart, and we all have this thing that we love to do. But man, I feel like so many worship musicians never even get to that moment where they are just in the moment, where the band is playing, where they aren't thinking about their next chord, and they're not thinking about the change that's coming up, but they're just getting to enjoy the fact that this band is playing as a band and sounds amazing. If you want to keep your people and have them not burn out, give them that experience.
Yeah, it's so good.
And so I think so. I guess to answer your question about the competition thing, it's like, yeah, we are competing about a lack of caring about the people. We expect a lot of them, but we don't give them the tools to do it. And it's just like, I just feel like that should be so different, but that's just me.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, what I'm really taking away there is just like the importance of pouring into people and investing in the group you have, and how that's a bigger threat than any competitor out there. Is just like, do churches and church leaders care enough to put resources as much toward people and equipping them as toward facilities, or you mentioned sound equipment, that sort of thing. And I think that's huge.
Yeah, it's a big deal, man. It really is. But it takes a paradigm shift. It actually takes a leader.
It does.
Recognizing like, oh, you know what, this, and it makes so much sense once you actually talk about it. But a lot of us are so fried on all the other stuff that we have to do of making sure that the PowerPoint is right and that the set list is in order and all those things, that we don't get to do those really valuable things. And so my encouragement to people is always like, hey, we offer a free subscription on this. Pick one song,
just one,
and get the team to just be like, this week, whatever else we do, you're going to play this piano part, you're going to play this guitar part, we're going to do it this way, and just see how it changes your life. Because it fully will. You will see your team. You might get a little resistance at first. Well, no, I don't. I just want to just tell me what key it's in. I'll solo. Like, no, that's just once. Just do this one song and see what happens.
Yep.
It's like,
I love that. Man, I hope that's something that anyone listening, church leaders especially, can take away from this. Like, apathy can be really just kind of crushing to ministry, but like creativity and excellence especially things can take off. Like, people can go places and they get hooked on that, and they want to bring more and want to serve more without that risk of burning out, as we've talked about. That's so good. Jason, is there anything else that you want to leave with us, with everyone listening or watching, before we wrap it up?
Not particularly, man. That's all. You've drained me of. That's all I have.
That's good. Basically, we got all the wisdom. We've downloaded everything from.
We've got everything now. That's good. If anything, I'd say, hey, just go check out Worship Artistry. You can actually, if you go to worshipartistry.com/lessons, we have a bunch of free lessons on there that you can try, and just because it is one of those things that it is still hard to explain to people when you're like, oh, like YouTube. It's like it is not like YouTube. There's something really valuable about always seeing the same teacher using the same language and teaching it the same way. Because if you go guitar tabs for this song, you're going to get 50 different ones, and they're all going to be different. And, half of them, I can still tell if somebody learned to play Blackbird on the internet because there's this tab that's floating around that is wrong.
Yes.
And it drives me insane every time. I'm like, oh, internet, right? Got it. Like, I'd like to track down the person that did that and find out, like, are they out there somewhere? Who created this version of the song?
Did that. Man, that's awesome. And I would also encourage people to check it out. You said worshipartistry.com. Any other channels to follow you on? What's the best ways to follow around with your work?
Sure. We also have a podcast, the Worship Artistry podcast, which is really fun. And that we bring artists on and church work. It's just kind of all over the place, but it's really kind of meant to help start conversations about things. And it's a great thing for people to listen to with their team. So you kind of go, hey, dude, check out this episode on this. And it gives you something to talk about. It's like, one of my favorite episodes on there is one that I just did with just our bass instructor, talking about the hospitality of worship and just what our job is as a worship leader. And so things like that are great. Like I said, the website, there's youtube.com/worshipartistry, facebook.com/worshipartistry, Instagram/worshipartistry. I think we got them all lined up there.
That's so good. It really is a really fresh, just innovative way to equip people involved in ministry. So I know that everybody who checks it out is going to be really just excited and pumped on what they're finding. So Jason, thanks so much. Thanks for joining. This has been really fun. And also just say thanks to everyone checking out Equip and Engage. We love having these conversations with people just like Jason who are in the church space or in the tech space, or they're in both. And that intersection is what we're all about here. So thank you, Jason. Thanks for checking out Equip and Engage, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Equip and Engage, where we're sharing insights learned from thousands of conversations with leaders and pastors around the world. To follow along with these conversations, subscribe today or visit our website.